well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, and I'm glad that you've joined me on the program today. We've got a lot to talk about, as a matter of fact. We're going to get you caught up on what's going on in Washington, D.C., because there's a lot of stuff going on regarding your right to keep and bear arms in our nation's capital. We're also going to take a look on this program at one of the most idiotic arguments that I have run across opposing permitless carry, constitutional carry. It looks, by the way, like Texas is going to get it done. An agreement reached over the weekend between House Republicans and Senate Republicans on a permitless carry bill. This is the last week of the legislative session in Texas, so they need basically one more concurrence vote in the House and then in the Senate, and then they can send this bill to Governor Greg Abbott for his signature. He's already said he'll sign it. It's just a matter of, can they beat the clock? Basically. So we are paying close attention to that, also paying close attention to several things going on in our nation's capital, including a potential hearing for Joe Biden's ATF nominee, David Chipman, the former ATF agent turned gun control activist. That could come on Wednesday. We know that the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding a confirmation hearing on Wednesday. We don't know who those nominees will be. But the New York Times had reported a couple weeks ago that David Chipman, they were eyeing a late May hearing for David Chipman. So the timing would certainly fit. Meanwhile, the public comment period is now open for the proposed rule from the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to redefine what a frame and a receiver is under federal law. They also want to impose new record-keeping restrictions on FFLs, and they want to redefine what a suppressor is. I mean, this is a big sweeping gun control bill. They want to, actually not a gun control bill, a big sweeping regulation that, frankly, I believe oversteps the administrative authority of the ATF and the Department of Justice, and this is really something that Congress should be dealing with. We're going to talk more about that on tomorrow's Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. But again, a lot of stuff going on in the nation's capital. And the best way to defend against unconstitutional legislation, unconstitutional regulations, is to get involved in the fight. And one of the best organizations out there fighting those legal battles each and every day, the Second Amendment Foundation. You can be a part of this organization. All you have to do is text JOIN SAF to 474747. You can sign up to be a Second Amendment first responder. That way you will be part of the grassroots army of Second Amendment activists who are keeping an eye on things and informing their legislators what they think about these bad bills, these bad regs. And of course, when you join the Second Amendment Foundation, you are also assisting in their legal fights against these unconstitutional gun control laws. So again, text JOIN SAF to 474747 and become a Second Amendment first responder today. All right, so I mentioned the most idiotic argument that I have seen regarding constitutional carry. It comes from a website called the Good Men Project, and apparently, if you're a good man, you're supposed to be all in on gun sense. Hashtag gun sense. That, according to the author of this piece, Tim Clark. Now, the headline here, I think, really misses the boat in terms of what he's actually saying. State-mandated tolerance is the title of Tim Clark's piece. But he's talking about a couple of bills in the state of Ohio, including constitutional carry. I don't know why he's specifically referring to Ohio, when we've already had, so far this year, just this year, Montana, Utah, Iowa, Tennessee become constitutional carry states. Again, Texas poised to become a constitutional carry state as well, but whatever. He's talking about the Buckeye state. And he says, snaking its way through the Ohio Senate is HB 227, the constitutional carry bill. HB 227 will allow any citizen over 21 who meets certain simple baseline qualifications to carry a concealed weapon without any training or permit. Stand your ground meets Red Dawn, Tim Clark writes. Yeah, it removes the onerous 8 hours of training to qualify for a concealed carry permit, during which you aren't even required to prove that you're able to hit a target. Tim Clark apparently is good with that training mandate, even though he doesn't like what the mandate actually includes. So obviously, Tim Clark, not a fan of constitutional carry. Why is that? Well, let's explore a little bit deeper. Oh, he also, by the way, has another problem with a piece of legislation in Ohio that would remove the duty to inform. Basically, if you're pulled over for a traffic stop in Ohio right now, when the officer comes up to your car, you're supposed to say, here's my license, here's my registration. By the way, I'm a concealed carry holder and I am carrying. And there's a bill in Ohio that would basically require the police officer to ask, are you carrying? As opposed to you, the burden being on you to inform the officer right away. Tim Clark also has a problem with this bill, too. He says, State Representative Scott Wiggin believes that, quote, officers are trained to suspect that somebody may be armed. In fact, if they're not, then that's a shame because bad guys never tell police that they're armed. Somehow, Clark writes, that reasoning conjures two distinctly unreasonable, awful conclusions. The first assumption, police should approach every situation assuming that they're dealing with a bad guy, quote unquote. Right now in the city where I live, they're trying to find a new chief of police. It's been narrowed to 4 candidates, and they all approach the question of procedure with the same basic answer. It's not about enforcement, it's about engagement. Police shouldn't approach every situation thinking they're going to need to use deadly force. Most people seem to believe that hasn't worked well so far. See Black Lives Matter. Second assumption, bad guys be more willing to tell police officers they have a gun if asked. All right, let's talk about both of those arguments here for a second. I would argue that contrary to what Clark says, police officers are not trained to approach every situation thinking that they're going to need to use deadly force. In fact, I think that's a bogus argument, Mr. Clark. Law enforcement, and frankly, every one of us should be trained, and it should be sort of in the back of our head that, hey, this situation could turn south. Not that it's going to, but that it could. And yes, law enforcement officers approach every situation knowing that no matter how peaceful a traffic stop might be, it could turn deadly. We've seen this happen. We know that this happens. As for Clark's second argument, bad guys will be more willing to tell police officers they have a gun if asked. Well, no. That's not, in fact, that has nothing to do with this legislation. We know that bad guys are not going to tell cops that they have a gun. It's about shifting the burden from the law-abiding legal gun owner to the law enforcement officer so that the law-abiding legal gun owner does not inadvertently end up in legal trouble because he did not inform the officer right away that, yes, she has a concealed carry license. And yes, she's carrying at the moment. This provides clarity. And there's been some confusion about when you're supposed to tell an officer that you have a concealed carry license that you're carrying. Again, this removes all of that confusion. Officer comes up to the car, knocks on your window. Can I see your license and registration? And by the way, are you a concealed carry holder? Boom, that's it. Here's my license. Here's my registration. Yes, I am carrying right now. No big deal. But Tim Clark acts like this is going to be the end of the world. He says, quote, either way, this movement towards a more heavily armed, bellicose society is troubling. What are we so afraid of? The only answer I can come up with, he says, is each other. And I guess that makes sense, considering how quickly we're rushing towards a society armed to the teeth and waiting for a chance to practice a little state-approved vigilante-style self-defense. I'm not sure where Tim Clark lives, but we've had the right to keep and bear arms in this country since before it was a country. The right to keep and bear arms, of course, enshrined in the Bill of Rights in 1791, but that didn't create a new right. That protected a pre-existing right. As for rushing towards a more heavily armed society, I think I'll point out to Tim that the right to carry revolution in this country really took place starting in the late 1980s with the passage of shall issue concealed carry in the state of Florida. And idiots like Tim back then were flipping out, calling Florida the gunshine state, saying it was going to lead to the Wild West and there were going to be shootout. And you know what actually happened when concealed carry took effect in Florida? Violent crime started dropping. Yeah. In fact, violent crime is less than half of what it was in 1986, the year before shall issue right to carry became the law in the state of Florida. And Florida now has more than 2 million active concealed carry licenses. So more guns, more people carrying firearms for self-defense has not led to vigilante-style self-defense. No, it's actually led to people being able to protect themselves within the boundaries of the law, not taking the law into their own hands. We've seen less violent crime, not more. And that's pretty common, actually. In the 42 states that are shall issue concealed carry, violent crime has fallen steadily since the early 1990s. It should be noted, too, that violent crime has also dropped in the 8 states that are still may issue because law-abiding gun owners aren't the ones out there driving violent crime, which Tim Clark seems to not understand. So what's Tim Clark's solution? You're going to love this. I'd like to see a Bill of Rights come up for a vote requiring everybody to smile at a stranger. It would make everybody a lot happier if we could make kindness a mandate. It would save a lot of lives if we could make tolerance a law. What if we could stop all the incessant whining about individual liberties? The incessant whining about individual liberties. Do you know who finds advocating for civil rights to be whining? Those who take their civil rights for granted, like Tim Clark. Clark says, what if we could stop all that incessant whining about individual liberties and recognize we're part of a larger group with responsibilities towards the whole? What if we could engineer a world where people, all people, felt carrying a gun was foolish, expensive, and dangerous? Nah, that's too crazy, he writes. It'll never work. Well, I'm glad he finally came to some common sense. Because you're right, Tim Clark. That wouldn't work. We live in a nation in which the right to keep and bear arms is protected by the Constitution. But not only that, the right to keep and bear arms is protected by the 100 million American gun owners, the more than 20 million Americans who are exercising their right to carry and have a valid carry license, as well as those in the now 20 states, hopefully soon to be 21, that do not require a license to carry. As long as you can legally own that firearm, you can legally carry that firearm. Now, Tim Clark, what about the lack of the training requirements? Let me ask you this. If you decide that you're going to start carrying a firearm for self-defense, don't you think you're going to want some training, regardless of what the law says, regardless of whether or not there's a mandate? Don't you think that the vast majority of us who, again, maybe never have picked up a firearm before, are going to want that basic gun training so that they feel competent themselves to carry a firearm, so that they feel better about themselves doing this? Because I got to tell Tim, in none of these states that have adopted constitutional carry have we seen the firearms instructor industry disappear. There are still plenty of firearms instructors in places that have had constitutional carry in the books for years, like the state of Arizona, or the state of Alaska, or the state of Vermont. And again, it's because most people who will choose to carry a firearm for self-defense want that level of training until they feel comfortable and competent carrying a firearm around. It has nothing to do with a mandate. It has everything to do with us. Would you get behind the wheel of a car not knowing how to drive? Would you operate a, power tool? I've never done it before, but heck, I'm going to put my hand right there. No. And we don't always need the government to say, you need X number of hours of training. This is how you get, 150 hours before you can be a nail technician or some nonsense like that. Because the regulatory power of the state steps in and mandates X, Y, Z number of hours of training before you can do activity A, B, or C. Whereas, again, most of us don't need that. And I would argue that, again, the vast majority of individuals who would bypass that training, I'm going to do it myself, might not be legal gun owners in the first place. What we do know is that in the 20 states, heck, I'll even throw out the states that approved permitless carry this year. In the more than a dozen states that have had constitutional carry laws on the books, not one of them, not a single one of them, has gone back and said, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. We're going to go back to a shall issue system of concealed carry. And so you legal gun owners, you can still carry, but now you've got to get a license. You've got to have that training. We tried it your way, and it was awful. So we're repealing that law. We're going back to the way things work. Not a single state has done that. And here's Tim Clark still fretting about, why do we have to have so many people carrying guns around? Well, A, it's our right to do so. But B, we also know that if every single legal gun owner in this country were to give up their firearms tomorrow, which isn't going to happen, but let's just say that we all did, the criminals are not going to do the same. Bad guys will still do bad things with firearms, regardless of what good guys happen to do with theirs. Every lawful gun owner in this country could hand their firearms over to Joe Biden or federal law enforcement officials, but armed criminals are still going to exist. And I would argue that good men and good women have the same right to keep and to bear arms that we've always had. And that owning a firearm and carrying a firearm in defense of yourself or others doesn't make you a bad man, as Tim Clark would argue. As a matter of fact, let's normally we do our recidivist report, then we do our armed citizen story. We're going to go a little out of order today because I want to get to our armed citizen story. This is from White Settlement, Texas. The headline here is egregiously misleading, but let's just take a look here. Man fatally shoots brother-in-law with, quote, AR-type rifle, according to police. Now, you read that headline, you think, my God, why did he do that? What's wrong with this guy? Well, you get into the actual story from the NBC affiliate in Dallas-Fort Worth, and it turns out that the individual who used the rifle was acting in defense of himself and defense of his family. This happened Friday afternoon. I want to just read this story to you because, again, I think NBC Dallas-Fort Worth blew this story. A man has died, they write, after his brother-in-law shot him through an apartment door Friday afternoon following a domestic disturbance. The incident happened in the 8100 block of Foxfire Lane, just south of Lake Worth, at about 12:15. Police say a woman had a disturbance with her husband and took her 3 children to a downstairs neighbor's apartment where other family members were located. The husband then went to the downstairs apartment and threatened to shoot down the door while he demanded to see the children, police said. Police say the husband fired a 12-gauge shotgun through the apartment door, and the wife's brother returned fire, shooting several rounds with a, quote, AR-type rifle at the husband. The husband was struck several times, taken to a local hospital in Fort Worth where he died. Police say the man's wife, brother-in-law, and other witnesses were cooperating with the investigation. Police say the children were not physically harmed. NBC Dallas-Fort Worth portrays this in its headline, and frankly, the first few paragraphs of the story, as if this were a domestic altercation and the brother-in-law shot and killed this man with an AR-style rifle because he was the aggressor. That's not the case. The husband of the woman who fled her own apartment with her children in tow followed her, armed, and fired a shotgun blast through the door of the apartment so he could get in and do God knows what. Acting in self-defense, that guy's brother-in-law returned fire, killing the would-be intruder and saving who knows how many lives. Look, is this a tragic situation? Absolutely. Do I wish that it hadn't ended this way? Of course. Could it have been a hell of a lot worse? Yup. And we can't ignore that fact either. So I wonder if Tim Clark would acknowledge that this man with the AR-type rifle was a good guy in this situation. Or would he just bloviate about the need for us all to put our guns down and pass a law where we're all required to smile at each other? Probably option number 2, which is why idiots like Tim Clark spewing their anti-gun nonsense should be called out. I was going to say ignored, but no, they should be called out because they are trying to propose that we live in some sort of utopia that does not and cannot and will not ever exist. In the real world, there are guns out there. You don't have to like it, but it's a fact. And the guns aren't going anywhere. And you don't have to like that either, but it's still a fact. We also have a right to keep and own them, or keep and bear them. And again, doesn't matter if you like or dislike that fact, it is a fact. So forget this nonsense about, wouldn't it be great if we could all just put our guns down and smile? It'd be fantastic. It'd be great if we all had ponies too, but that's not going to happen. In the real world, bad guys can get a hold of guns. No matter how restrictive a state's gun control laws, bad guys can still get a hold of guns. No matter how restrictive a country's gun control laws, bad guys can still get a hold of guns. We just saw a shooting in New Jersey this past weekend at a house party. Apparently, rival gangs, one from the north side of town, one from the south side of town, ended up shooting at each other. 2 people were killed, 12 people injured. In England, where handguns have been banned since the 1980s, a Black Lives Matter activist was shot, is in critical condition. What police say they believe was just a random attack. They don't believe that she was targeted. But again, really restrictive gun control laws in England, really restrictive gun control laws in New Jersey, bad guys still find a way to get a hold of guns. That's the reality. Now, if these gun control laws aren't impacting the bad guys, then maybe we need to start thinking about the need for some of these laws to be on the books in the first place, because I would argue that they are inhibiting lawful possession of firearms far more than they do anything to curtail violent crime. Speaking of violent crime, one thing we could do to cut down on violent crime, actually prosecute violent offenders, ensure that there are consequences for their actions. Gun control advocates, they love to point to Missouri. They say, well, since Missouri removed its permit to purchase a pistol, violent crime has gone up in the state. Yeah, that's true. It has. But I have a feeling it has less to do with the removal of the pistol purchase permit, a relic of the Jim Crow era, and more to do with cases like this, because I see headlines like this out of Missouri on a fairly regular basis. Probation granted in Joplin shooting case. This is really troubling. It's from the Joplin Globe. Terrell Harbin is 27 years of age. He was given a suspended sentence in probation when he pleaded guilty last week to a reduced charge in the shooting of a woman a year ago and a separate firearm offense. He changed his pleas to guilty last Thursday in Jasper County Circuit Court, pleading guilty to a reduced count of second-degree assault in the shooting and wounding of 19-year-old Ariel Devine, as well as an unrelated count of unlawful possession of an illegal weapon. Harbin had been facing counts of first-degree assault and armed criminal action in the incident which took place last July. The assault charge reduced to second degree, the other count dismissed, and the state agreed to a suspended sentence on both convictions. So instead of going to prison for shooting a woman, Harbin is going to do 5 years of probation. Devine testified at a preliminary hearing in August that she went to the scene of the shooting to retrieve some clothes that she had left there. She said she knocked on both the front door and the side door before she went back to the front porch, where she suddenly heard gunshots and looked down and saw that she was bleeding from her thigh. Now, Devine testified at that preliminary hearing in August that she never saw who shot her, although she acknowledged having made a statement to police identifying Harbin as the shooter. She said on the witness stand that was only because she had been told that Harbin was the shooter. She acknowledged later contacting him while he was in jail because she wanted to know if it was true, because she considered him to be a friend. In his petition to plead guilty this week, Harbin admitted, quote, "I accidentally shot Ariel Devine through a door." Now, the illegal weapon apparently was a AK-47 rifle with a sawed-off barrel that was recovered by police in the backseat of a vehicle that had been stopped about 2 months before the shooting. Harbin was in the vehicle with 2 other people. He told police that he had just bought the gun. So he admitted to buying the gun that had been illegally modified. And that didn't matter either. because he's still got a suspended sentence. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have less of an issue with the suspended sentence for a nonviolent possessory offense than I do a probationary sentence for shooting somebody. But Terrell Harbin getting off with a slap on the wrist. And while I would love to believe that this 27-year-old is going to go through the next 5 years on the straight and narrow without getting in any trouble whatsoever, the odds are against that happening. If there are no consequences for violent actions, it stands to reason that we should expect more violence. And sadly, when you've got individuals who are walking away with probation after they admit to shooting somebody, we should not be surprised if the lesson that they learn is, I can shoot someone and really not pay a price. Certainly the case in Joplin, Missouri, with Terrell Harbin. Finally today, our good deed of the day from Chelmsford, Massachusetts, where a police officer and several bystanders in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to save 2 lives at a local lake on Sunday afternoon. According to the Chelmsford Patch, Officer Derek Hill was there at Freeman Lake on Sunday, and he heard yelling and some sort of disturbance coming from the shore. He saw a woman waving and pointing to the water and heard her yelling that someone was drowning. So he ran down to the shore. He saw 2 people in the water, about 35 feet or so from the water's edge. He radioed dispatch for backup, took off his police gear and shoes. Nearby swimmers helped to bring one of the swimmers to shore, but he saw the second swimmer bobbing up and down in the water, calling for help. So Hill raced into the water, swam out to where the swimmer was, grabbed a plastic float along the way, and brought in the swimmer in distress. He was able to lift the swimmer onto the float. Swimmer indicated he was feeling dizzy, had swallowed a lot of water. Officer Hill and another bystander then pulled the swimmer to shore, laid him on the beach. Another officer arrived, helped keep both the rescued swimmers alert and upright. Then the paramedics had arrived and took over providing aid. The swimmers and their mom told police that their plastic float had blown away in the wind. One of the boys tried to swim after it, and he could no longer touch the bottom. He began to panic. His brother went out to help him, but wasn't a strong enough swimmer. Both of the juveniles taken to Lowell General Hospital for further evaluation, but they are expected to recover. And again, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, Officer Derek Hill, we thank you for your very good deed. Now, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you, as always, for joining the program. Don't forget, you can become a VIP subscriber. All you got to do is go to bearingarms.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GUNS for a 25% discount. That's going to get you exclusive analysis, commentary, news stories, and more. Not available to the regular readers of bearingarms.com. It's our way of saying thank you for helping us bring you the latest segment of news and information each and every day with programs like Bearing Arms Cam & Company. So again, bearingarms.com/subscribe and use the promo code GUNS to get 25% off your membership. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube or Bearing Arms Cam & Company on Rumble. That way you'll never miss a program. If you want the podcast version, want to take us on the go, we've got you covered there as well. Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and, of course, the townhall.com podcast page. We will be back tomorrow. I do want to spend a little bit more time talking about the new proposed rule from DOJ and ATF, so we'll delve into the details on the next edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. But in the meantime, be well, be safe, and be free.